Welcome to the Making of Me podcast, where we explore the journey, breakthrough, and the defining moment that shape who we have become. Our today's guest is Jody Brooks, a coach and workplace well-being consultant who help people and organizations move from overwhelm and burnout to clarity, confidence, and authentic performance. Jody has lived the challenge. He now helps others navigate severe anxiety, depression, burnout, and even suicidal thoughts. Through his experience, he developed the 9 principles of authentic living, framework for rebuilding life from the inside out and designing workplace and personal life where people control the truth. It's really a pleasure and honor to have you on the show, Judy.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Judy. So, Judy, in one sentence, you said your defining challenge was overcoming childhood trauma, parental addiction, and depression, and suicidal thoughts. Can you share how that particular event shaped your path?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think they're at the beginning of the story, really, and they kind of turned me in. I think you find a lot of people when you're faced with kind of those traumas in childhood, you become very good at people pleasing, and it kind of then sets you up almost to be a high achiever. So because you're constantly, you learn very early on to push through, to say yes, to perform, to do what makes you acceptable to the people around you. Kind of my early childhood, kind of my parents separated when I was very, very young. In my very early years, I was from pillar to post between the two parents. Until my dad then disappeared out of my life at the age of 5. He just vanished for 16 years in total. And then struggling with my own identity, my own sexuality. And then also my one constant through my childhood had been my grandmother. And I lost her when I was 19. And that then, because that was my kind of strong foundation through all of the other stuff, that was my foundation. And that's really when I always say, like, the wheels fell off everything, kind of that's when the depression kicked in. And, my early 20s were very much this constant battle, but very much, like, again, as a people pleaser, learning to project myself well on the outside so that, kind of I was still fitting in, etc. Whereas on the inside, what was going on was very different. And, that's 30 something years ago now, unfortunately. So in that, kind of back in those days then, you certainly didn't discuss mental health problems. Yeah. You certainly did not bring it up. And I gradually began to buckle and was ashamed that I couldn't cope, was ashamed that, everybody else seemed to be okay. Everybody else was okay. And quietly, secretly inside, I was slowly breaking. And I eventually, I hope nobody, ever has to go there. And if you are there, kind of by the end of this, hopefully you'll know that there's a better option. But it's very, if you've been in that situation, when your mental health gets to that level, it actually stops being emotional and it actually starts being physical. It becomes a physical pain and you feel it in everywhere in your body. It's very, like they would say, psychosomatic, but you genuinely feel that level of exhaustion. And when I attempted to take my life, it wasn't a cry for help. It wasn't even because I didn't want to be here. It was purely because I didn't know how else to stop the pain. I didn't know how else to make it go away. And I just could not take it anymore. So thankfully I wasn't successful. It wasn't meant to be. And it's one of those defining points in my life, which very strangely now I look back and I am grateful for it. I'm grateful for those moments because there are many more moments in my life where the things that I learned in my recovery there and breaking free of depression became vital in my survival through the rest of my years. Now, I'm not saying that you need to go and do that to kind of, or to experience that to be able to do it. And if anybody listening is feeling that way, I always say to everybody, there is always a choice and you just have to speak to someone. And it's a hard thing to say, I feel suicidal. It's a very, it feels to turn around to someone and say, look, I actually really do feel suicidal.
Yeah.
Like, you're first of all scared of the shame. And secondly, there's something that feels very final about saying that sentence. It actually feels like you're saying, that's it, I'm done. And the point is that when you say that to someone and you seek help, you'll realize that there is another choice and there is a journey and a pathway that will take you away from feeling that. And as much as you can't see it in that moment, you must just tell someone and ask for help, because I promise you that is the hardest part of that journey. The hardest part of that journey is to say, this is how bad it is and I need help. From that point forward, it's not an easy journey, but it's much easier. And that kind of then set it up. Thankfully, and it started coming through that in my 20s, started my whole kind of 30 odd years of personal development. I became obsessed and have constantly continued on that, on this wanting to understand myself and wanting to understand all of those, because depression has appeared again throughout my life. Now, I have never had to go back on medication since my 20s because I learned to recognize the signs. I learned to do all of those things, and I learned to respond before it got that bad, respond before I needed to do that. So, and that's kind of where I want to go today and talk to your audience, is about, when you constantly people please, when you don't have boundaries, and when you strive for external success, you will burn out. And you will, if you don't do something about the burnout, end up feeling like that, feeling like there is no choice. That's what burnout at its extreme feels like. So post my 20s, I built a fantastic career. I traveled the world internationally, worked at some of the biggest fashion weeks, London, New York, Paris, worked on 3 continents, 37 countries, had an amazing, successful career. And I also had my own business that was incredibly successful. I won awards. But at 47, I, on the outside, looked like I'd got everything.
Yeah.
The nice Audi, the convertible Audi, the business, like everything. And I just felt hollow on the inside. I just was like, this feels hollow. And I decided that I needed a new challenge. And what I didn't realize at that time, I was 47 at the time. What I didn't realize at the time is what I'd started experiencing was midlife. What I'd started experiencing was this messy midlife that happens, because now, in reflection, it's so much easier to share that with your audience. Is we see midlife as, kind of that we're nearly at the end. I think that's part of the problem is, you suddenly hit 47 and you become very conscious.
Yeah.
But interestingly, I'm starting to work with people younger and younger. So like people now are turning up at 30, feeling exactly the same way I did at 47, because I don't even think it's a midlife crisis. I would call it a purpose crisis. What it is a purpose crisis. It's when we're like, hang on a moment, this is not sustainable. I can't work at this pace and this level, and I can't carry on like this. And I don't feel my needs are met inside. And I think there is this element that I say to when clients come to me, and particularly with anxiety, when people hit midlife around anxiety, that anxiety is this fear of the future.
Yeah.
Like, the clock's ticking, like, am I going to have this? Am I going to, like, what's going to happen? Tick, 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 tick. And that just fuels the anxiety. And what I say to clients is, like, if you think about it, it's called midlife for a reason. You're only halfway. So, like, you're only halfway. You've only reached the halfway point of the marathon. So why do you think it's over? This is like where you get your second wind. If you are running a marathon at the halfway point, you've got to pick up the pace. You're like, okay, I can do this. So really, you've just settled in, okay? You've only just settled in. And if you think about it in terms of the fact that if you take off the first 20 years of our life, because that's all a construct, that's very much where we are being taught who we're going to be, not deciding who we're going to be. Like in our first 20 years, we go to school, we conform to lots of things, and we learn that people pleasing, and we learn what's acceptable. And then all of a sudden we come out at 20 and it's like, whoa, I'm an adult now, and now I've got to do this by myself.
Yeah.
I've got to practice this adulting thing. And so if you kind of take the first 20 off, when you hit 40, you're not even halfway. So that's the first thing. And when you start to reframe it like that, then it feels much more like opportunity rather than crisis.
Yeah,
And
amazing.
because otherwise it feels like crisis. It feels like, oh my God, and then from the anxiety we get overwhelmed, is like where we create all of these lists of things that we should do within our head, kind of just burn ourselves with this whole ongoing list of kind of not being good enough.
Yeah.
So when I decided, not realizing that I'd hit this midlife crisis, but I just said I wanted to change. And so I actually got rid of my business and I went to work for a huge global company in a very good job in the corporate world. And I just remember at the end of my first week thinking I'd made a mistake. And I carried on, but a year into being there, I found myself one day sat in a restroom in a toilet cubicle with my head in my hands crying, staring at a poster that said, "Do you need to talk to a mental health first aider?" And I just remember in that moment sitting there going, this has to stop. This has to stop. And the job involved me working 15, 16, sometimes even 18 hours in a day, flying all over the place, driving, etc. And, it's easy to be wooed by the supposed glamour, but there is no glamour in an airport departure lounge, let me tell you. And there is very little glamour at 5 o'clock in the morning behind the steering wheel of a car, driving through snow to go to a meeting. And I drove home that day from head office. And on my way home, it was a 3-hour drive. And I did the first part of what I now teach people to do, which is to stop, to just stop and apply some awareness. And instead of trying to keep pushing through, I allowed myself to be in that moment. And I was honest. I had possibly, again, if I was honest about the fact that I'd started to have those thoughts again. I'd started to feel like I did in my 20s. And I was like, but it did feel different. It felt different. And it's scary because you feel like you're back at one of these most traumatic points in your life and you're like, how did I get here? I've been so good. And then I remembered that bit that I just said before is, yeah, I did feel like I couldn't go on, put one foot in front of the other. I was actually now in physical pain. I was so exhausted. I was doing the bare minimum. I was a shell, really. But on the outside, nobody in the office, nobody in the company would ever have known. And on the way home, I remember thinking those things through and then remembering that I had a choice. You have a choice. The only person that changes this is you. And I think sometimes, particularly when it comes to work, we think that we don't have choices. We are made to believe, particularly in a workplace, that we have to do all these things. And if we don't, we're not performing, we're at risk, all of those things. But you still have a choice as to whether that's for you. And the reality of it was the job wasn't going to change. The reality of it was the structure of that company is based around burning people out. I wasn't the first. I wasn't going to be the last. So you can sit there and be angry and want to take the system on, which will burn you out just as much. But my quickest route out was to make a choice for myself. And it was that word, this has to stop.
Yeah.
This has to stop. And when I got home after my drive that night, I walked through my door, took out my work laptop and sent an email that said, I won't be in for the next week. I'll contact you on Friday. And I then took the next 5 days to do just that, to just stop. Now, obviously, when I coach people, not everybody's in a position to do that, but most companies allow you some time off, etc. But I say to everybody, even if you can't do that, that's quite drastic. And if you can't do that, then you need to find a day, and you need to find a day where you get up and you say, today is about stopping. The only thing I have to do today is stop. Okay.
Yeah. It's really amazing, though. Yeah. Starting with more like your childhood traumas and having to find coping mechanism, being people pleasers, and after all, more like being overachiever and not knowing when to stop, and the fact that now you just have to pause and say, stop.
Yeah. You do.
Amazing.
And I think that's that bit. And so then when you stop, and I have a whole tool that I work through with clients called Start Stopping. And it's a 2-hour exercise that they work through, which is, being realistic about what does really serve me right now, because we're constantly taking so much on that, we're not kind of letting things go. And so all that we do, I always say, people like, it's a bit like if you were going on holiday, or I give the example of when I used to travel lots for work, I would be maybe, I could be in Dubai on Monday. Okay. And then I could fly back to the UK, and then I could be going to Norway, to Oslo, to Sweden. I could be going to any of those. Now, when I got back, I would have to unpack my case and take out all the Dubai clothes and put in clothes for Oslo and Sweden. So 2 things. I wouldn't go to Oslo with the same clothes I went to Dubai, because I'd be very cold in Oslo.
Yeah.
Okay. And because my suitcase is a limited size, I can't just stuff the Oslo clothes on top of the Dubai clothes. So what I have to do is I have to unpack. And that's what we have to do emotionally with our lives. We have to almost see that we are like a suitcase.
Yeah.
So there's lots of stuff in your suitcase that you don't need. There's lots of things that you need to take out of your suitcase that no longer serve you. And then when you know where you're going and you decide on your destination, you can choose what needs to go in it. So that starts to stop overwhelm as well, because then in that whole process, you're deciding on a destination, and you're deciding on what serves you and what no longer serves you. Because it's very easy when you're a people pleaser to take on board things that are not for you. And the trick is, when you know where your destination is and you know what's right for you, you then navigate without risking burnout, because you don't take on tasks, jobs, roles, or things that no longer serve you. They don't serve you, and they don't serve your purpose. The reason we burn out is we take on way too much responsibility for things that are not for us. And it makes it sound really simple, and it isn't simple. Like, it takes practice.
Yeah.
I never, as a coach, sometimes, you see it all over the internet. I'll fix your life in a week, download this tool. You'll all be better by Monday. Yeah. And I'm like, well, you're a much better coach than me, because it takes me a lot longer with clients to get there, because we're undoing years and years of behavior. But, there is that one thing is about stopping. You've got to get off the hamster wheel. You've got to stop running and decide exactly where you are and where you're going, and stop just blindly getting up and going through that whole thing, because that does lead you to burnout. And burnout, in the end, for me, I went back to work, and in that, I took 2 weeks off eventually. And in that time, I realized that I didn't know where I was going. I didn't have a destination. I'd just gone into this job, and that was my destination. And the identity of being, this business owner working internationally, and now I was working internationally, but within a corporate, there'd been so many shifts in my identity that I never stopped to unpack my case. And so I took all of the things that I needed as a business owner
into
into this huge corporate organization, and it was like wandering around in the snow in a pair of shorts, like in Oslo kind of thing. That's literally.
Yeah, it was a big bag.
I completely was like, I was completely out of sync with everything around me. And when I unpacked the case and I looked at it and I decided, okay, well, where do you want to go? I set a new destination, and I knew that I wanted to do something in the service of other people. one of my core values is to make a difference. And I realized in that process, I've worked in education for most of my 30-year career. I've been responsible for education, teaching younger people, bringing them up, teaching them how to survive in the industry. And so with the experience I'd kind of started to have through midlife, I was like, I want, to kind of share this with people and help other people similar to me who've reached this situation. And so I decided to train as a coach. And so I went back to work and used the time in the evenings and when I was in hotel rooms to do my coaching qualification, became a Jay Shetty certified life coach, and then gradually put together a business. And after 12 months, left the corporate world confident and not scared of walking away from an amazing salary, from a company car, from all of those things, because through the process that I went through the 9 principles that I work through with my clients, I knew that success was no longer an external thing.
Yeah.
Success is an internal thing. And success really is happiness. If you ask people what they want to be happy. But if you ask people, what do you think is successful? Very few people will say happiness.
Yeah.
We see them as the ultimate success is to be happy.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. Yeah. This is really amazing.
That's not outside of you. That's inside of you. Like, that's happiness comes from within. That's an internal joy that you create when you know that you are living your life aligned to your values, to your purpose, and you get up every day and you know that you're going to do great things and you know what those great things are.
Yeah.
You don't have to be, on stage in front of thousands of people. You don't have to have the big Instagram following. You don't have to do all of those things. They're all for other people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Amazing.
And if that is really what your purpose is, okay, then go for it. Like, if that really is your purpose. But if you're just doing those things because you think that that's where happiness lies, because you've seen an image of someone and you think, well, they look really happy. The truth is no one knows really what's going on the inside. And I promise you, there are a lot more people out there who you think have got it all, that on the inside feel like they've got nothing, because they've constantly chased these external benchmarkers of success: car, house, holiday, social followers, all of these things.
Yeah, amazing.
And the real joy and happiness is in the simplest of moments.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jody. That's really, really amazing. Isn't just about the Instagram. It's about the Instagram, because success really is what happiness. Amazing. So, Judy, before we get to go, can you actually walk us through your 9 principles and how you help people move from overwhelm to clarity?
Yeah, so I do, something that I call like the 90-day reset. And a lot of it is based around, there are 4 hormones like that we have in our body. We can call them dose because it's very simple, which is dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. Now, those are where we get our balance, from our motivation through to our sense of love, through to our calmness and all of those things. And in the modern world, they get triggered by things that shouldn't really trigger them, because we no longer live out, in the wilderness hunting yetis or whatever it might be, kind of thing. And so, I heard a great quote the other day is, are you fighting a saber-toothed wolf, or is it just Tuesday? And that's the thing is, our brain doesn't always know it's just Tuesday. It thinks that we're like, it thinks that we're under threat. And so the whole process of the 90-day reset and the 9 principles of authentic living is to realign through different tools and behaviors this natural flow of chemicals, from dopamine and endorphins to oxytocin and serotonin. So there is science behind it, as well as, kind of a colleague of mine always says that I'm like crystals and yoga meets science, because a lot of the things that I do appear like meditation and those kind of things, but there are all scientific reasons why they work, from writing down in a journal to sitting and meditating. But we start with the ultimate principle, which is awareness. And that's that stopping. So the first part for all my clients is awareness, and that's stopping what you're doing and becoming aware of what's going on. And then once you've stopped and you become aware, you need to understand it, understand the impact, understand why you think it's positive. So in awareness, we look at positives and negatives. What do you value? What don't you value? And then in understanding, we really look at like where they come from and start to look at, what are your core values? I always, when I do a clarity call with clients, I always say, like, give me your 5 core values. And most people sit there and go, but our value, we all have values. We have at least 5 core values, and they guide all your decision making. So you're kind of going blind if you don't know. So, as an example, one of mine is integrity. And so when I'm around people that I don't feel have integrity, or in situations that don't have integrity, I get triggered.
Yeah.
But because I know that's my value, I now know that that's what's going on. So I'm better placed to deal with it. And also, before when I was saying about not people pleasing, that also empowers me to make choices. Okay, well, this is a situation without integrity, so I don't need to do that. And I know why I don't need to do it, and I don't have to feel guilty. So after understanding, we look at trust, because we all have saboteurs going on inside, from imposter syndrome to self-doubt, etc. But they are there to protect you. Your saboteurs, your self-doubt, all of those things, they're there to protect you, to keep you safe. And so what we do is we listen to what they're saying, and we start a new conversation with them, because sometimes those saboteurs can stop us from growing because they can hold us in the same space. So we learn to have a better conversation with them in trust. And in trust, we get our self-belief back, because quite often we've lost our self-belief, which is we're just in the hands of others. And then after that, we do honesty, because if you have too much self-belief without honesty, then that's a dangerous thing, because self-belief will have you believe anything.
Yeah.
So, we've all been in rooms with people that have had far too much self-belief that you're like, really? So honesty is about being honest about some of those things, but also being honest about some of the little white lies that we tell ourselves that keep us stuck. And then from honesty, we go into empowerment. So then we look at, okay, well, where do I want to be? What's my purpose? Because as you work through them, your energy starts to shift. As we start to realign those hormones, your chemistry starts changing. So your thought patterns change in line with it. So then we move into empowerment, because by then people are like, okay, I want to move on now. And then we go into nurture. And in nurture, we look at goals and smarter goals. So where we then start to think about, well, okay, if that's where you want to be, now let's plan your route. And in nurture, I use a lot of stuff from James Clear, Atomic Habits. About 1% better each day. And that's what the nurture is it's not huge change, it's tiny steps that you can repeat. The trick to it is consistency.
Yeah.
So don't ever set a goal that you can't be consistent with. Nurture it. The hugest oak tree does not grow overnight. It starts out as the tiniest acorn, and over many years of constant pushing, it grows to become something mighty. And we are the same, and we need to understand that. We can have big changes, but we need to understand that big changes come in small steps.
Yeah.
After that, we go into transformation. And transformation is really about honoring everything that we are, and understanding that this isn't about change, this is about transformation. It's everything you are, every bit of your journey. So for me, understanding that my mental health in my 20s became an essential part of my journey. So, I talk openly about it because I honor that. I honor that part of my journey, and it is one of the bits that now holds me together. And so this isn't about you weren't good enough. This isn't about leaving behind some of you and becoming somebody entirely different. This is about transforming into something you were always destined to be, your best self.
Yeah.
And so in that transformation, we do a lot of work on how you see yourself, future self, and how you got here. And then the final two are integrity, because by that time you've done an awful lot of work and you will start to see that other people see it differently, and it's easy to take a backward step because, you know, people will be uncomfortable with the new version of you.
Yeah.
And then it's hard to break free. And sometimes we have to walk away from groups of friends. Sometimes we have to even distance ourselves from family members. And sometimes we have to change jobs, just like me, because otherwise everything that you are, your authentic self, is under threat, and you cannot turn up as your authentic self unapologetically. So integrity is about knowing your truth, owning your truth, and never deviating from it. And don't let anyone steal your truth. Don't let anyone steal your truth. And then finally, compassion, which is the final part in the 90 days. Now, this isn't compassion for other people. I always like to think that compassion for other people is easy. And if you can't do compassion for other people, you really do need help. Okay. Because like compassion for other people is relatively easy. There's always someone that we can be compassionate to. Self-compassion, now, Arrow, that's an entirely different thing. Being compassionate to ourselves is very difficult. And so learning to be able to look in a mirror and say, I love you, you are enough, is hard. There are very few people that can go and look themselves in the mirror and dead in the eye and say, I love you, I think you're perfect, and you are enough. And so self-compassion is about those things, and it's also a huge part of forgiveness. You know, I am a compassionate person. I had forgiven lots of people for things that had hurt me or traumatized me, my parents, etc. But I realized that I'd never forgiven me. And we sometimes, even in a situation where we've been really traumatized, we carry guilt because we think, well, maybe we were to blame. Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe it was my fault. And certainly for me, I had to forgive myself for lots of things that had gone on where I'd forgiven other people. And an exercise that I do with my clients is I get them to write themselves a letter of forgiveness. I get them to write it as though they're writing to someone else and forgive themselves for all the things that they're still carrying. It's something I did myself, and I actually put it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, and posted it to myself. And then it came through the mail, and I read it and I cried. And then I actually took it, I live near the sea, and I took it to the beach and I tore it into little bits and I floated it out to sea. And when people frequently ask me what's the hardest of the 9 principles, I always say self-compassion. That was the one that was really hard. And that's the one why we do it at the end as well, because you need to be that far through the 90 days to be ready to let go of some things. And, you know, I do various different things. Some people come and work with me for a year. Some people, you can access the 9 principles on my community and you can do it monthly yourself with no coaching. And then some people just do a 90-day reset with me. Yeah. So it just kind of depends how people show up.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. Actually, this is really robust. Awareness, understanding, trust, honesty, empowerment, nurture, transformation, integrity, and compassion. Yeah, it's really amazing and really robust. And thank you so much for sharing the whole lot of insight. So, Judy, from our audience who would love to reach out to you, either for coaching or to get more of your content or your writings on your book, how can they reach out to you, and where's the best platform?
So the easiest way to get hold of me, it's one simple thing because everything's there, is to go to my website, which is www.authenticcoaching, all one word, me. So authenticcoaching.me. You can also join my free community. I have the Authentic Community on there, which is an online community and resource. The start stopping that I talked about today, that tool's there for free. You can start stopping today. I urge you, if you're having like that, start stopping today. You can download the tool, the workbook, and you can also message me directly through there and find all my social links. And if you register there, you'll get my blog when I write articles. My book is on the way, but I don't think it's going to be done for another 18 months at the moment. Right. But the book has a title. It's called I Was Here All Along, and it's about that journey to yourself.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your stories and wisdom. You have actually gained through the struggles. and recovery, from facing burnout and suicidal thoughts to guiding others towards authentic living. Fiona is a powerful reminder that even in our darkest moments, transformation is really possible. And it's really a pleasure and an honor to have you on this show. And thank you for sharing your insight.
Thank you, Arrow. It's been an absolute pleasure on this sunny day. So, yeah, it's been great talking. And if anybody out there, even if you're having any of those thoughts, then send an email, send a message. Like, you're not on your own, and it gets better once you've done.